Welcome back, trendsetters. Most games in development hell are doomed, but today we're celebrating the miracles that survived the chaos to become absolute icons. From total reboots to decade-long waits, these 10 titles proved that a rocky road can still lead to a masterpiece. To find out which cursed projects are actually must-plays, it's time to stay ahead of the game. Starting us off at number 10 is a game that fans waited over a decade to play. Diablo III's development was a saga of shifting art styles and internal reboots that lasted 12 long years. When it finally arrived in 2012, it was met with the infamous Error 37, a server crash that locked millions out of the game. Even once people got in, the real money auction house and a controversial loot system made many feel like the dark, addictive soul of the franchise had been lost to corporate greed. However, Blizzard didn't just walk away. In a move that became a blueprint for long-term support, they scrapped the auction house and launched the Reaper of Souls expansion. This update introduced Loot 2.0, which completely overhauled how gear dropped, making the gameplay loop feel rewarding and fun again. It turned a rocky launch into an upbeat, monster-slaying masterpiece that fans continued to play for over a decade, eventually paving the way for the success of Diablo IV. The immersion in Diablo III is all about the power fantasy. Once the mechanics were tuned to perfection, the satisfaction of clearing a screen full of demons with a single spell became second to none. The sound design and gothic visuals created an atmosphere that felt heavy and rewarding. It's a harsh reminder that even a king can stumble, as long as they're willing to put in the work to reclaim the crown. Ultimately, Diablo III is a story of resilience. It survived a 12-year wait and a disastrous launch to become one of the best-selling RPGs of all time. It's an essential play for anyone who loves a good redemption story in their gaming library. By listening to the community and focusing on the fun, Blizzard turned a potential failure into a legendary success. At number 9, we have Nathan Drake's final adventure, which almost went in a completely different direction. 2 years into development, the original creative leads left Naughty Dog and the project was essentially rebooted. The team behind The Last of Us stepped in and had to rewrite the script and redesign massive parts of the game under a very tight deadline. It was a high-stakes race to the finish line for one of Sony's most important franchises. The transition was difficult, but it resulted in a game that felt more grounded and human than the previous entries. Uncharted 4 wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was a deep look at Nathan's relationships and his struggle to leave his dangerous past behind. The immersion was boosted by industry-leading facial animations and lush, sprawling environments that made every cliffside climb feel high stakes and cinematic. The gameplay also saw a massive evolution, with wider levels that gave players more freedom in how they approached combat. The addition of the grappling hook and improved stealth mechanics made the action feel more fluid and next-gen than ever before. It's an upbeat example of how a fresh perspective can take a struggling project and turn it into a Game of the Year titan. In 2026, Uncharted 4 remains a technical and emotional high watermark for the industry. It gave one of gaming's most beloved icons a perfect send-off while proving that Naughty Dog's storytelling prowess is unmatched. It's a masterclass in how to handle a franchise with heart, even when the behind-the-scenes drama is at its peak.
Coming in at number 8 is a game that many fans feared would be a disaster. When Nintendo handed the Metroid franchise to an unproven Texas-based studio called Retro Studios, the industry was skeptical. The development was plagued by internal shifts and a sudden pivot from a third-person perspective to a first-person one. People were terrified that the atmospheric 2D world of Samus Aran wouldn't translate to a 3D shooter. Against all odds, Retro Studios delivered one of the highest-rated games of all time. They managed to perfectly translate the Metroidvania feel of exploration and isolation into a first-person adventure. The immersion was incredible. The HUD was designed to look like it was inside Samus's helmet, with steam and visor reflections that made you feel like you were actually wearing the power suit. The world of Talon 4 was a masterclass in environmental storytelling. Every scan of a ruin or a strange creature added layers to the lore, making the alien world feel ancient and lived in. It was an atmospheric journey that rewarded curiosity over mindless shooting. Even in 2026, Metroid Prime still stands as a benchmark for 3D game design. Ultimately, Metroid Prime is a triumph of vision and dedication. It's a success story of a studio proving the doubters wrong and creating a timeless classic. It reminds us that sometimes the most radical changes are exactly what a franchise needs to reach its full potential.
At number 7, we have the king of the reboot. For nearly 8 years, id Software worked on a version called Doom 4 that looked more like a cinematic military shooter than a traditional Doom game. The developers eventually realized that by following modern trends, they were losing the soul of the franchise. In 2013, they made the brave choice to scrap years of work and start over with one goal: make it fast, violent, and fun. The result was Doom 2016, a high-octane masterpiece that introduced the world to push-forward combat. By replacing slow cover mechanics with glory kills that rewarded aggression, they turned a failing project into one of the best shooters ever made. The immersion was driven by a pounding heavy metal soundtrack and a zone of pure adrenaline that made the real world vanish the moment the music kicked in. The game was a middle finger to the slow, serious shooters of the time, opting instead for a power fantasy that felt relentless and brutal. The Doom Slayer became a legend once again, and the game's success rejuvenated the entire arena shooter genre. It's a reminder that in a world of complex mechanics, sometimes ripping and tearing is all you really need. Doom 2016 earns its spot for its sheer confidence and its willingness to pivot. It took a project that was lost in development hell and turned it into the gold standard for modern FPS design. For any gamers looking for a game with pure, unadulterated energy, this is the one.
Coming in at number 6 is the game that almost broke Bungie, Halo 2. After the massive success of the first game, the team showed off a mind-blowing E3 demo that turned out to be technically impossible on the actual Xbox hardware. They had to scrap almost everything and rebuild the entire game in a little over a year. This crunch was so intense that they famously ran out of time to finish the final act, leading to that iconic cliffhanger ending. Despite the chaotic behind-the-scenes scramble, what hit the shelves in 2004 was a revolution. Halo 2 essentially built the blueprint for modern online matchmaking via Xbox Live. It took the frantic arena combat of the first game and brought it to the masses, creating a social phenomenon that defined a generation. It's a story of a team that refused to fail, delivering a multiplayer experience that arguably saved the Xbox brand. The immersion in Halo 2 came from its scale and its variety. For the first time, you could play as the Arbiter, seeing the war from the Covenant's perspective, which added a layer of political intrigue to the story. The dual wielding and vehicle boarding made the combat feel faster and more dynamic. It was a world that felt much bigger than a simple aliens versus humans conflict. Ultimately, Halo 2 is a miracle of engineering and design. It survived a complete engine rewrite and an impossible deadline to become a permanent icon of the FPS genre. For any gamers, it's a reminder that sometimes the most chaotic journeys lead to the most legendary results.
At number 5, we have a game whose development hell was so public it actually led to the creator leaving the company. Metal Gear Solid 5 was the culmination of Hideo Kojima's career at Konami, but the relationship soured during production, with reports of Kojima being barred from his team. When the game finally launched in 2015, it was technically missing its final chapter, yet it still managed to be a masterpiece. Even an unfinished Kojima game is better than almost anything else on the market. The Phantom Pain offered a level of player freedom that still hasn't been topped. You were given a massive open world and a set of high-tech tools, and the game simply said, figure it out. Whether you wanted to sneak in silently or drop a tank from a helicopter, the game's systemic AI reacted to your every move. The immersion here is purely mechanical. The world feels intelligent because the enemies learn from your tactics. If you always attack at night, they'll start wearing night vision goggles. This creates a social gravity where your actions actually change the world around you. It's a complex playground that respects your intelligence and rewards your creativity.
Ultimately, Metal Gear Solid 5 is a bittersweet triumph. It represents the end of an era, but it went out with a bang that still echoes today. It's a celebration of stealth action that reminds us why Hideo Kojima is considered a visionary. For any gamers who values deep, systemic gameplay, this troubled masterpiece is a permanent fixture on the must-play list.
Number 4 is a game that had to die 3 times before it could live. The development of Resident Evil 4 lasted 6 years and went through 4 completely different versions, including one that eventually became Devil May Cry. Capcom just couldn't find the right hook for the sequel until series creator Shinji Mikami stepped back in and made the radical call to move the camera over Leon's shoulder. This pivot to a third-person, over-the-shoulder perspective was a massive gamble that changed the industry forever. It perfectly balanced white-knuckle action with the franchise's signature tension, creating a perfect gameplay loop. Leon S. Kennedy became a legendary protagonist, and the game's campy but cool tone made it an instant classic for players around the world. The world of Resident Evil 4 is a masterclass in pacing, moving from a frantic village to an eerie castle and a high-tech island. The immersion comes from the constant pressure of managing your resources while being hunted by relentless enemies. It was a game that felt unlike anything else in 2005, and even in 2026, the 2023 remake proves that the core design is timeless. Resident Evil 4 is a lesson in the power of the pivot. It survived a decade of reboots to become the blueprint for modern third-person shooters. Whether you're a horror veteran or a newcomer, this game is a masterclass in how to turn development hell into a masterpiece.
At number 3, we have a game that Rockstar insiders once described as nightmare. The development of the first Red Dead Redemption was a notorious mess, with shifting lead designers, ballooning budgets, and a crunch culture that was incredibly intense. There were times when the higher-ups reportedly didn't even think the game was fun to play. Despite the chaotic behind-the-scenes drama, what emerged in 2010 was a game that changed the open-world genre forever. It wasn't just GTA with horses, it was a somber, cinematic epic about the death of the American West. John Marston became one of gaming's most iconic protagonists, a man trying to buy back his soul in a world that no longer had room for outlaws. The immersion in Red Dead Redemption was light years ahead of its time, with a world that felt lonely, beautiful, and dangerous. The random stranger missions and the haunting score created a vibe that felt completely authentic to the frontier. It was a world that respected the player's intelligence and rewarded their curiosity, proving that a strong artistic vision can survive even the most disorganized production. Red Dead Redemption is a triumph of persistence. It survived one of the most difficult development cycles of the 2000s to become a permanent fixture on greatest games of all time lists. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and atmosphere, reminding us that sometimes the most difficult paths lead to the most beautiful destinations.
Coming in at number 2 is perhaps the most famous redemption story in gaming history. When Cyberpunk 2077 launched in 2020 after years of delays, it was a technical catastrophe that was eventually pulled from the PlayStation Store. For years, Night City was a punchline for broken promises, but CD Projekt Red didn't give up, spending years in the shadows working to rebuild the game they had promised back in 2012. The turning point was the 2.0 update and the Phantom Liberty expansion in late 2023, which overhauled the game's DNA. They fixed the AI, revamped the skill trees, and finally made Night City feel like a reactive, breathing organism. By the time the game hit its 5th anniversary in late 2025, the narrative had flipped. It's now considered one of the best action RPGs ever made. In 2026, the immersion of Night City is unmatched, with path tracing and incredible sound design making every back alley feel like a work of art. The story of V and Johnny Silverhand hits harder than ever, offering a deep dive into corporate greed and human survival. It's a story of a developer owning their mistakes and regaining the trust of millions of fans. Cyberpunk 2077 earned its spot because it proved that development hell doesn't have to be the end. It took nearly a decade and a disastrous launch, but Night City finally became the masterpiece we were waiting for.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best things in life are worth the wait.
Claiming the #1 spot is a game that is quite literally a miracle. First announced in 2010, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 faced a decade of cancellations and studio closures before development restarted in 2018. But the real hell was still to come, as the Ukrainian team at GSC Game World had to navigate a real-world war, relocating their staff while continuing to build a world that reflected the very devastation they were living through. When the game finally launched in late 2024, it wasn't just a video game, it was a symbol of resilience. The Zone was brought to life in Unreal Engine 5 with a level of atmosphere that felt almost heavy to breathe in. It captured the gritty, soulful spirit of the original cult classics while modernizing the survival mechanics for a new generation, proving that no amount of chaos could kill a truly great vision. In 2026, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 stands as a masterpiece of the genre. After a series of massive post-launch patches, the game has reached legendary status, offering a world where the weather and the silence are just as dangerous as the mutants. The immersion is total, weaving a story about human greed and scientific overreach into the very soil of Chernobyl. Ultimately, Heart of Chernobyl is the definitive development hell success story. It survived a cancellation, a pandemic, and a war to become one of the most atmospheric open worlds ever created. For the gamers who value soul and grit in their gaming, this is the gold standard. It's a haunting, beautiful achievement that reminds us why we love this medium.
10 games, 10 miracles. But which one is your favorite, trendsetters? Or is there a game stuck in development hell right now that you're still rooting for? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the list, hit that subscribe button to join the community. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay ahead, stay gaming.